Watermelon sugar.
Natalie Jones left a 4th of July party last year around midnight and then texted a friend an hour later saying, "I made it," but then mysteriously vanished, only to be found dead inside of her car 3 months later in a neighboring city. A family member of Natalie's reached out to me to cover this story, so please be respectful. 27-year-old Natalie was a mom of 2 who lived in Corinth, which is a town in Heard County, Georgia. On July 4th, 2020, Natalie attended a party at a friend's lake house in Jackson's Gap, Alabama. At around midnight, Natalie got in her hot pink 2002 Chevy Cavalier and began the hour-and-a-half drive back home. A little after 1 a.m., Natalie texted a friend at the party saying, "I made it." Shortly after this, when Natalie hadn't been in contact with any friends or family, she was reported missing. Massive ground and aerial searches were launched, but there was no sign of Natalie or her car. Phone records showed that her phone pinged off a tower in Franklin, Georgia, which is about 10 minutes from her home in Corinth. They also showed that Natalie's phone went dead shortly after sending out that last text. Then 93 days later, on October 6th, Natalie's body, which was inside of her car, was found in a wooded area about 60 yards off of the road near the intersection of Roosterville and Welcome Road in Franklin. An autopsy and toxicology testing were conducted, but they both failed to provide a clear cause of death. Authorities were able to conclude that there were no identified traumatic injuries or trauma found on Natalie's body. Natalie's car showed no sign of damage from a crash, meaning that her car did not end up there accidentally. It was purposely driven to that location. Authorities concluded that Natalie and her car had been in this spot the entire time, as the growth around her car was 7 feet tall and bushes had grown up to the tires and bumper. But Natalie's friends and family don't agree with this, as search parties, including the ground and aerial searches, previously looked through the area near where her car was found. Authorities claim Natalie's car wasn't visible from the road, and that's why it was hard to locate her, but a group of people who help recover property through scuba diving called Adventures with Purpose had heard about Natalie's case and helped find her and her car within 2 days. Investigators say there is no evidence to suggest foul play. Natalie's mom, Elaine, disagrees. At one point during the investigation, Natalie's ex-boyfriend, Jonathan Lawrence, was named a person of interest. At the time of her disappearance, Jonathan was out on bond and was previously locked up for allegedly trying to hire a hitman to kill a Troup County deputy. He also was facing drug trafficking charges. During his release, he was wearing an ankle monitor that didn't show him in the same area as where Natalie was last seen, but police said this does not rule him out. As of today, Natalie's family still does not know what truly happened to her, or why she sent a text message saying she made it, but was found nearly 3 months later in a neighboring city, still in her car. If you know anything regarding Natalie Jones' death, please call the Heard County Sheriff's Office at 706-675-3329 so that Natalie's family can have closure.
This is the tragic case of Grace Millane. The family chooses not to speak the name of the man who did this, so I will do the same and I will just refer to him as him or this man. Grace had just turned 22 when she disappeared from Auckland, New Zealand. She was originally from Wickford, Essex, and had just recently graduated with her bachelor's degree. She was currently on a backpacking tour for her gap year. She arrived to New Zealand on the 20th of November, and she got to Auckland on the 30th. When Grace didn't respond to her family on December 2nd, which was her birthday, her family immediately knew something was wrong. She was always responsive when they would reach out to her. Her family then reached out to the police and the place that she was staying, and the place that she was staying confirmed that she had never came home back from the night before. On December 1st, which is the day before she went missing, she actually met up with the man who she met on Tinder. After talking, they both decided to meet up and do some bar hopping, get some drinks, that kind of thing. Now, during this date, Grace was actually sending her friends updates on it and letting them know how it was going. She even talked about how well they clicked together, and it was surprising. After about 4 hours of bar hopping and drinks, they decided to go back to where the man was staying. They got on the elevator, they went to the 3rd floor, and as soon as they exited the elevator, that was the last time that Grace was seen alive. And then about 8 a.m., you see the man enter the elevator, but alone. He went to a nearby store and grabbed cleaning supplies and gloves. And then he returned back to the hotel, and then at about 2:50, he left again to go meet up with another Tinder date. And I might add, this piece of shit, they have receipts from, it was 1:30 a.m., him messaging this other Tinder date saying, "Are we still meeting tomorrow?" And at this point, we think Grace was already dead. And then the next day, you see him on CCTV with a trolley with 2 suitcases in it, and one of them had Grace's body in it. On December 3rd, he went and dug a shallow grave, put her body in it, and then just put some loose sticks over her. That was it. And then went on his way. It's also to note that he had a rental car, so after he did this, he went to the car wash to wash the car, and then he dropped off the shovel that he used to dig the hole. He just left it on the side of the car wash building. Thankfully, this dumbass on December 6th decides to call detectives to let them know that he was actually with Grace on her birthday, on the 2nd. I'm assuming he did this to make it seem like he was forthcoming with information and that he was not guilty. I'm actually running out of time, but on December 8th, he got arrested and charged with the murder of Grace. He also showed the police where the body was. On February 21st, 2020, he was charged with life in prison with a 17-year period that he could not apply for parole. He's been trying to appeal this conviction, but it's been overturned. Also, multiple women have came forward about the abuse they endured by meeting him on Tinder months before Grace.
You've probably seen the case of the Murdaugh murders all over the news lately, so let's talk about that. For over 80 years, the Murdaugh family has been well known in South Carolina, as 3 generations have basically controlled the local prosecutor's office. The Murdaugh family has a legal dynasty, and because of this, some people think they're untouchable. So let's start a bit toward the beginning. The specific branch of the Murdaugh family that we're going to be talking today involves, from left to right, Buster, Maggie, Paul, and Alex Murdaugh. In 2019, 19-year-old Paul Murdaugh was on a boat with 6 other people. He was the one driving, and everyone was drinking. The boat crashed into a bridge, and everyone fell overboard. 5 people were accounted for, but not 19-year-old Mallory Beach, who ended up dying. Paul was indicted on charges of boating under the influence, causing great bodily harm, and causing death in connection to the crash. He pled not guilty, and it was likely that because of his family connections, he would get away with it on a lesser sentence than if your average person did it. This likely caused a great amount of stress for the Murdaugh family, particularly Alex. He was a prominent lawyer, and any negative eyes on his family's name would make him look bad. And then on June 7th, 2021, something bizarre happened. 53-year-old Alex Murdaugh called 911 and reported that his son Paul and 52-year-old wife Margaret were shot dead on his property. He had supposedly just got home and found them like that. Both victims were said to have multiple wounds from being shot multiple times. But following his wife and son's death, Alex Murdaugh would act a bit strangely. You see, just a couple months later, on September 3rd of 2021, Alex resigned from his law firm. Now, it was his law firm, his name was in the title. It's pretty bizarre to just resign without reason. But just the next day, Alex would call 911 to report that he had been shot in the head. He had been stopped by the side of the road or something, and somebody just shot him randomly. However, the wound was superficial and didn't cause any long-term severe damage. And just 2 days later, Alex's attorney announced that he would be entering rehab. And then the next day, the law firm that he worked at announced that he had been embezzling lots of money. Some insiders said that it could be in the millions of dollars. Alex's license to practice law was suspended following this. It was revealed on Tuesday, September 14th, that authorities had charged a man in Alex's shooting. Alex Murdaugh had actually asked a man named Curtis Edward Smith to purposely shoot him in the head. This was in the hopes that Alex would die and the life insurance would go to his remaining son, Buster. Do you think this has any connection to the murders of Paul and Maggie? Did Alex kill them and was trying to take his own life? Or is this all just some strange coincidence?
This case is heartbreaking.
And you will agree when I say this guy was an absolute monster. His name is Adeen Cobin. At the age of 31, he spent a whole year grooming this 14-year-old girl. He convinced her to flash him on webcam. And when she did, he took a screenshot. He then spent the next 8 months blackmailing her, and then simply posted the images online. When the police eventually got involved, they told the family the best course of action would be for them to move. And they did. The girl's name was Amanda, and when she relocated, Adeen tracked her down again. This time he made a Facebook group with all her photos and contacted random people from her school and showed them. As a result, Amanda got really badly bullied. At one stage, some kids at her school even beat her up, and her dad found her laying in a ditch. The family thought it was best for them to move again. But sadly, the same thing happened again. This absolute creep literally ruined her life. And after 3 years, she sadly took her life. Now, police were able to track down this guy, and it turns out Adeen was from the Netherlands. He has now been extradited to Canada. He denies all allegations against him, however, the evidence is pretty damning. And to make matters worse, at the time of his extradition, he was serving 11 years for online fraud and harassment in another case in the Netherlands. Let me know if you've heard of this case below, and for more 7 Sins Crime, hit that plus button.
More than 8 days since Susan Smith claims a carjacker stole her 2 babies. What everyone hoped would be a joyous appearance by Susan and David Smith becomes yet another anguished plea.
Okay, so let's back up. In October of 1994, 23-year-old Susan Smith reported her 2 sons and her car missing from South Carolina. Susan told police the day was pretty much like any other. She was riding in the car with 3-year-old Michael and 14-month-old Alexander, and they came to a stoplight. But that normal day takes a major turn when Susan says a black man with a gun approaches her car and jumps in. This is the drawing a police sketch artist would make from Susan's description. But Susan's story just gets even more horrifying. After the perpetrator hops into her car, she says that he makes her drive for several miles before forcing her out, taking off with her car and her 2 kids in the backseat. The story spreads like wildfire, setting off an absolute media frenzy across the country. Police searching through thousands of tips looking for who could possibly be the perpetrator. For 9 days straight, Susan and her husband made media appearances begging for the safe return of her son.
I would like to say to whoever has my children that they please bring them home to us where they belong.
But for some, Susan's story was starting to sound a little sketchy, like for part 2.
What's up, everybody? All right, so you guys, as always, before we get started with this story, if you're not already following me, you guys, please hit that follow button. Help your girl get to 2 million followers. And while you're at it, please click the link in my bio to download the Newsbreak app to keep up with stories like this and other stories that I'm covering. Now, y'all, today we're going to be talking about the crazy case of Emma Presler. Now, this story first starts with the case of Sierra Rod, which is the woman pictured behind me. Now, Sierra Rod, she's a 20-year-old and she suffers from cerebral palsy. In September of 2020, Sierra was at her family home with her mother, her father, and her 15-year-old brother. Now, during this time, it's being said that Sierra's brother had a feud with this group, but this feud did not have anything to do with Sierra or her family. Now, Sierra's mom is saying that she went to police about the feud and was really afraid that something may have happened. But police did not take this serious, and in September of 2020, their house was shot up. Now, this group was shooting this house up because of Sierra's brother. I'm guessing they had some type of feud going on, but they ended up killing 20-year-old Sierra.
Mom, I don't even know why 90% of the bullets went through my daughter's room, because they knew where my son's room. They shot right through there too. Crystal Rod says she was in her daughter's room minutes prior to the shooting. And the bullets started, and my husband threw me to the ground, and he told everybody to get down. And Sierra must have stood up. On the other side of these large bullet holes was Sierra's bed. Deputies say they found 40 to 60 shell casings with 4 different calibers outside of the Timbercrest Drive home. Rod says she called deputies 17 times about the group after her son. They didn't do anything. They didn't do anything. And I told him someone was going to die. Rod says she never imagined it would be her sweet girl, Sierra.
Now, you guys, the group that allegedly killed Sierra, now she was an innocent person. She had nothing to do with whatever they had going on, was Jason, Andre, Austin, and Xavier. Now, investigators also believe that this girl right here by the name of Emma Presler, she was only 18 years old when this happened, and they tracked one of the getaway cars back to her. Now, she was also arrested and charged with the death of Sierra, but when she went to court, a judge did something that I really have never seen before. Y'all not gonna believe this. Watch this.
Ms. Presler, you're charged with the offense of murder.
Emma Presler is free to leave Harris County Jail. Earlier, a judge said that there was not enough evidence to keep her locked up.
I can't say there's probable cause. There needs to be more investigation done.
Harris County deputies say the 18-year-old is connected to the death of 20-year-old Sierra Rod. They say Presler was found in a red truck that looks similar to one spotted on surveillance video near Sierra's home around the time of the drive-by shooting. Sierra, who had cerebral palsy, was never...
Now, y'all, the judge let a murder suspect go. No charges. You're free to go. This judge sat in the courtroom and basically said, just because you drive a red truck doesn't mean that was the same red truck that was at the crime scene. But my thing is this, for them to link her to this, that means she had to have some type of ties to the 4 men that were arrested as well. But the judge let her go, and Sierra's family, they were livid because they couldn't understand how a judge could let a murder suspect out, like just dropping all the charges. Now, you guys, fast forward to August of this year, so 2021, a year later. Police and firefighters, they get this call about this house that is on fire. Now they respond, and what they find there is shocking.
Houston Fire, yes, correct. Okay, so the situation is we had crews arrive on scene to the house on fire. Two victims severely burned were outside already, so they were transported to Texas Medical Center. One was transported via Lifeline, one was transported by HFB crews. At this moment, we don't know their condition. All we know is they were critically burned, but their condition is unknown at the moment. At the moment, we do have HPD and arson investigators on scene, so we can't confirm or deny that at the moment.
So while responding to this house fire, they then found out that these two people, Devin Graham and Carissa Lindros, they were set on fire. Now, Devin told authorities that somebody doused them with gasoline, a woman, and lit them on fire. Now, they both were airlifted, in which Carissa was in critical condition, but Devin did pass away. After investigating this crime, you guys, they then tracked this fire back to Emma Presler.
This morning, the woman wanted for lighting a man on fire earlier this month is now in custody. Police have been searching for 19-year-old Emma Presler for nearly 3 weeks. They say she poured a flammable liquid on that man and lit him on fire. That man later died. He was severely burned. Presler was arrested in Hempstead yesterday evening.
So Emma killed an innocent person, Sierra Rod, and then a year later, she literally lit a couple on fire. Now, it's being said that she did know Carissa, but they're not really releasing those details yet. We're still waiting to know how she knew them, and we're still waiting on a motive for Carissa and Devin's attack. We already know why she did Sierra's, because she was aiming for the little brother. Now, y'all, don't let this pretty face fool you. This girl is evil. Let's just hope these charges stick this time.
Did you know that there was an 11-year-old serial killer in the 1960s? Her name was Mary Bell, and this is her story. Mary was born in 1957 in England. Her mother, Betty, was a sex worker, and she made it very obvious that she did not want Mary. She tried to kill her multiple times, pawn her off to other people, and in her trade of sex work, her specialty was BDSM, bondage, whippings, chokings, that whole thing. And she would even sexually abuse Mary in front of her clients for more money. Mary's stepfather, on the other hand, was a violent criminal, and he was also an alcoholic. You can begin to understand and see the pieces add up, especially when you factor in nature versus nurture. Unfortunately, Mary didn't have a fighting chance to be a normal kid. She never had a normal childhood, which makes this story fully disturbing and tragic. Mary grew up in Scotswood, which was a very impoverished area. There was a constant police presence. But the weirdest part of this whole thing is that the parents in the neighborhood would just let their kids stay out and play until all hours of the night. I mean, some kids would be out doing whatever until midnight. So they were just fully unsupervised. Mary didn't really have any friends. She was very isolated, and one of the girls that she used to hang out with was actually hit by a bus and killed in front of Mary while they were playing in the street. So on top of all of this other trauma she's facing, she has to watch a kid that she knows get killed. This story just really, But the fact of the matter is that kids were scared of Mary. She had a temper, and her attitude and mood could change on just like the flip of a coin. And she was known to punch, hit, scream, even choke kids on occasion. And it wasn't until Mary met Norma that things really got bad.
Imagine a 48-year-old man who ended up torturing and murdering his 16-year-old girlfriend. At 14 years old, Kellyanne Bates was described as mature for her age. She ended up telling her parents, Margaret and Tommy Bates, that she had a boyfriend. Her parents said that they were trying to raise her with respecting her boundaries and giving her space, so they didn't question who her boyfriend was or what he was up to or where they met or anything. Kelly managed to date her boyfriend for 2 years without ever introducing him to her parents. At the age of 16, Kelly informed her parents that she was now dropping out of school and was going to be moving in with her boyfriend. According to the UK laws, since Kelly was 16, there was nothing her parents could do about it at that point. At that point, the parents demanded to meet her boyfriend was, and to their surprise, they ended up being introduced to 48-year-old James Patterson Smith. After Kelly ended up moving in with her boyfriend James, her parents started to notice some changes in her demeanor. She went from being bright and bubbly and happy to depressed and sad every single time the parents did get a chance to see her. Kelly started showing up to her visits with her parents with bruises all over her arms and face. Kelly would constantly make up new stories and lie, saying she was jumped by a few girls or she fell down the stairs in order to cover up for the abuse that was coming from James. Kelly's mother, Margaret, would try to insist that she went to go see a therapist or a doctor, or that she get help for the abuse that was going on. But again, since she was already 16 years old, there was very limited things Margaret could do. And when Margaret would bring up any of these things to Kelly, Kelly would get really angry, storm out, and not talk to her parents for a long time. In November of 1995, Margaret tried one more time and pleaded with her daughter Kelly to please leave James. Kelly responded by storming out and telling her mother Margaret that she would be seeing them less now because of this altercation. Sadly, this was the last time Margaret would see her daughter. On April 17th, 1996, James Patterson walked into the Gordon Police Department and reported that his girlfriend had drowned in the bathtub. Trigger warning for violence. Although Kelly had indeed been drowned in the bathtub, there was more to it. The pathologist's report revealed over 150 injuries done to Kelly. These injuries included having her eyes gouged out, stab wounds inside of her eye sockets, mutilation of her ears, mouth, nose, and genital area. Her head was partially scalped. She was scalded with boiling hot water, burned with a hot iron, cut and stabbed with knives and forks, and her knees had been kicked in. She had not received water for weeks and had been starved, resulting into her losing 45 pounds. At the trial, James had the audacity to say that he was justified in torturing and murdering her. James claimed that Kelly taunted him about the death of his mother and only had herself to blame for how she ended up. James was sentenced to life in prison with the ability of parole after 20 years. Like, what the actual fuck, bro?